Timothy Caldwell had always been a curious boy. In a small town nestled deep in the heart of New England, where the rustle of leaves and the chirp of birds were the sounds of daily life, he found solace in the untamed mysteries of the world. While other boys his age spent their days running through fields, playing games, or making mischief, Timothy had a mind that was constantly racing, forever eager to uncover the secrets of the universe. He was the type of boy who would spend hours reading books about the stars, the earth, and the strange things that people whispered about in hushed tones, things that no one seemed to have the answers for. The world was full of possibilities, and Timothy was determined to find them, no matter where they led. It was the fall of 1867, and the air had grown crisp with the change of seasons. Timothy's family had a small farm on the outskirts of town, where they raised cattle, grew crops, and lived a simple, quiet life. Timothy's father, Isaac Caldwell, was a hard man, driven by the daily grind of farm work and the weight of responsibility for his family's livelihood. His mother, Caroline, was kind and nurturing, but she too had little patience for the idle musings of a young boy who spent more time reading than working. But despite the constant pressure to follow the routines of farm life, Timothy's mind was elsewhere, always wandering, always searching. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Timothy found himself restless. His father had sent him to the edge of the woods to fetch some firewood before the evening's chill set in. It was a task he had done countless times before, but tonight, there was something different in the air, a strange energy that tugged at him from the shadows of the forest. As he walked the familiar path, the trees around him seemed to whisper, as if the wind itself carried messages just out of reach. He felt it then, the pull, the quiet but insistent beckoning of something beyond his understanding. The forest was dense, its towering oaks and pines blocking out most of the fading sunlight, leaving the woods bathed in an eerie twilight. The air smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves, the scent of autumn settling around him like a heavy cloak. Timothy felt a sudden thrill rush through him, a sensation that tingled at the back of his neck. Something was out there. He didn't know what it was. Some primal instinct deep within him simply told him to follow. As he ventured deeper into the woods, the path became narrower, and the trees seemed to close in around him, their gnarled branches twisting like hands reaching out to touch him. The silence was broken only by the crunch of dead leaves under his boots and the occasional rustling of an animal hiding in the underbrush. His heart quickened, but not from fear. No, it was something else. Curiosity, excitement, or perhaps it was the sense that something extraordinary was waiting for him. It was then that he saw it, a faint glow through the trees. At first, he thought it might have been the last rays of sunlight filtering through the branches, but the light was too steady, too unnatural. Timothy's breath caught in his throat. The glow seemed to pulse softly, like a heartbeat, and it beckoned him forward, urging him to come closer. With each step, the light grew brighter, and the air around him seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't explain. He reached a small clearing, where the glow became blinding, yet oddly calming. And there, in the center of the clearing, resting atop a bed of soft moss, was a strange, otherworldly object, a stone, or perhaps a rock, but not like any Timothy had ever seen. Its surface was smooth and iridescent, reflecting the light in strange patterns. It wasn't quite round, but its shape was fluid, as if it had been molded by some unseen force. The stone shimmered with an ethereal light, and Timothy found himself drawn to it, as if it were calling to him specifically. He approached it cautiously, his heart racing. The closer he got, the more he could feel the strange energy radiating from the stone. It wasn't just a physical sensation, like the warmth of the sun or the coolness of a breeze. No, this energy felt alive. It was like the hum of a distant thunderstorm, vibrating through the very air, filling him with a sense of awe and dread all at once. Timothy knelt before the stone, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch it. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, a surge of energy shot through him, like a current of electricity running through his veins. His body jerked, and for a split second, everything around him went black. He could hear a buzzing sound in his ears, as though 1,000 voices were whispering at once. His thoughts became a jumble of images and sensations, visions of far-off places, of people he had never met, of events that seemed both familiar and impossible. Then, as quickly as it had come, the overwhelming sensation faded. Timothy blinked rapidly, trying to regain his bearings. His head spun, and he felt as though the world around him was shifting, but when his eyes focused again, the clearing seemed normal, too normal. The stone was still there, resting quietly on the moss, its glow dimming as if it had never been anything but a simple rock. Timothy pulled his hand away, feeling both lightheaded and strangely invigorated. He couldn't explain what had just happened, but deep down, he knew it was no ordinary occurrence. He stood up, his legs shaky beneath him, and took a step back. The forest, once silent and still, now seemed alive in a way he couldn't describe. The trees seemed to move, their branches swaying in a breeze he couldn't feel, and the air around him hummed, faintly, like the sound of a distant machine running just out of sight. He turned to leave, but as he did, he noticed something strange. The path he had walked down no longer seemed the same. The familiar route he had taken countless times now appeared unfamiliar, as though the very woods had shifted in his absence. He glanced back toward the clearing where the stone had been, but the glow was gone now, replaced by the dull, ordinary light of the fading evening. The stone was no longer there. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Had he imagined it all? Had it been some kind of dream or hallucination? He could still feel the tingling sensation in his fingers, still hear the faint hum of the energy that had filled him moments ago. No, this was real. It had to be. He hurried back to the farm, his mind racing with questions. What had just happened to him? What was the stone? What was the strange energy that had surged through him? And why did it feel like something inside him had shifted? His heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts tumbling over each other as he raced home. When he arrived, his father was already preparing to head inside for dinner, his face set in a permanent frown. "What took you so long?" Isaac Caldwell grumbled, not bothering to look up as he carried an armful of firewood into the house. Timothy didn't answer at first. He couldn't. His mind was still reeling from what he had just experienced. He stood there for a moment, catching his breath, before responding. I'm not sure, Timothy stammered. "I got lost in the woods." Isaac gave him a stern look, his eyes narrowing with disapproval. "Lost? You know these woods like the back of your hand, boy. Don't go wandering off like that again. Got no time for foolishness." Timothy nodded, his thoughts elsewhere. He couldn't explain what had happened. To him, how could he? The strange power inside him was a secret he knew he couldn't share. Not yet. He wasn't sure he even understood it himself. That night, as he lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in his mind like a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It had been real. Something had happened, something he couldn't explain, something that had changed him. But what was it, and what did it mean? The next morning, when he awoke, he could still feel the lingering sensation of the stone's energy inside him, like an electric charge waiting to be released. It was as if the world had shifted, and somehow, he was no longer the same boy who had left for the woods the night before. Timothy Caldwell was no longer just a curious boy lost in the mysteries of the world. He was now a boy that science couldn't explain. And he had no idea just how much his life was about to change. The days that followed the strange encounter in the woods were nothing short of disorienting for Timothy Caldwell. He went through the motions of his daily life, helping his father with farm chores, doing his schoolwork, and attending to the few friends he had, but his mind was elsewhere. The powers that had awakened within him that night were too much to ignore. They had surged through him with a raw intensity, and despite trying to convince himself that he had imagined it, the sensations were still vivid in his memory. The tingling in his fingers, the strange hum in his mind, and the visions that had flashed before his eyes, none of it made sense. Timothy's nights were spent lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts tangled in confusion and wonder. What had happened to him? What was the stone? Why had he been drawn to it, and why had it left him with such strange abilities? His powers, if that's what they were, had shown themselves in subtle ways at first. One day, while he was helping his father stack firewood, he had absent-mindedly placed a log on the pile and watched in disbelief as it floated for a brief moment before gently falling to the ground. The sensation that accompanied it was the same as what he had felt in the woods, an electric buzz of energy, as though his mind had unlocked something buried deep inside him. At first, he thought it was just a fluke, a trick of the mind, perhaps, a misperception of reality caused by his confusion and stress. But the more he tried to ignore it, the more his abilities seemed to intensify, making it harder for him to dismiss what was happening. His thoughts began to race at speeds that left him breathless, and he found himself accidentally moving objects with nothing more than a glance or a flick of his hand. There were moments when he could almost hear the thoughts of the people around him, whispers in the back of his mind that he couldn't explain. Timothy felt a deep unease. Something was changing inside him, and he was terrified of what it might mean. It was at the urging of his mother that Timothy's life took a turn toward the extraordinary. Caroline Caldwell had noticed her son's strange behavior, his withdrawn nature, the faraway look in his eyes, and the times when he would seem lost in thought for hours. She was concerned, but she had no idea how to help him. Finally, after weeks of Timothy's increasingly odd actions, she suggested he visit the nearby town's university to speak with Dr. Elias Fairchild, a renowned scientist who had made a name for himself studying the strange and unexplained phenomena of nature. It was not a suggestion she made lightly, but after overhearing Timothy muttering about his strange experiences and seeing the weariness in his eyes, Caroline decided it was time. The town of Havenbrook wasn't large, but its university was respected in academic circles for its focus on science and innovation. Dr. Fairchild was well known for his rational approach to solving the mysteries of the natural world, and though he had little time for the superstitions and rumors that often circulated in the town, Caroline hoped he might be able to shed some light on what was happening to her son. She arranged a meeting for the following afternoon, and Timothy reluctantly agreed to attend. When they arrived at the university, Timothy was struck by the imposing stone building that housed the Faculty of Science. The structure itself seemed to embody the very principles of logic and reason, tall, symmetrical, and unyielding. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old books and the hum of intellectual conversation. The walls were lined with shelves filled with scientific texts, and the floors were covered in the soft rustling sound of footsteps as students and professors moved about their business. Dr. Fairchild's office was a small, neat room with a large desk stacked with papers and scientific instruments. He was a tall man, well-groomed with sharp features, and he exuded an air of calm authority. His glasses perched on the edge of his nose as he looked over Timothy with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Mrs. Caldwell, drive," Fairchild said as he stood to greet them, his voice smooth and precise. "Timothy, I presume. Please, come in. I understand you've been experiencing unusual occurrences." Timothy nodded but didn't speak. His mother, sensing her son's unease, took the lead. "Dr. Fairchild, I've come because Timothy has been, well, acting strange. He's been telling me about things he can do. Things that don't make sense." Dr. Fairchild gestured for them to sit, and Timothy reluctantly lowered himself into one of the chairs. He could feel the tension in his shoulders, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea how to explain what was happening to him. Even as he sat there, he could feel the hum of energy inside him, a low, persistent vibration that seemed to follow him everywhere. Dr. Fairchild studied him closely for a moment before speaking. "I've heard rumors," the doctor said, "about strange occurrences in the area, sightings, odd behavior, things that defy explanation. But I must admit, I'm intrigued. Tell me, Timothy, what exactly is it that you've been experiencing?" Timothy swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to explain it. I found something in the woods, a stone, I think. When I touched it, something happened. I felt different. I can do things now. Things that I shouldn't be able to do." He paused, looking down at his hands. "Sometimes I think I can move things, like they're not heavy at all. And, sometimes, I hear things. Voices. I can see things before they happen." Dr. Fairchild leaned forward, his interest piqued. "What do you mean by, see things before they happen?" Timothy hesitated. "It's like I know things. I know what people are going to say, or I see what they're thinking. It's not always clear, but it happens sometimes, and it scares me." Dr. Fairchild's eyes narrowed. "Intriguing," he muttered, more to himself than to Timothy. He leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "Could you demonstrate for me? Perhaps move something, anything. I'll keep my hands off the table, and you can show me what you're capable of." Timothy's palms were clammy as he stared at the objects on Dr. Fairchild's desk. There were several books, a stack of papers, and a metal inkwell. His heart raced as he focused on the inkwell, willing it to move. At first, nothing happened, and Timothy's face flushed with embarrassment. But then, with a deep breath, he focused harder, and to his amazement, the inkwell began to lift, rising slowly from the desk as if guided by an invisible force. It hovered in the air for a brief moment before gently settling back down. The room was silent for several seconds, and Timothy dared not look up at Drive Fairchild. The doctor's expression was unreadable. For a moment, Timothy thought he had done something wrong, but then Drive Fairchild spoke, his voice calm and controlled. "Fascinating," he said. "I believe you, Timothy. What you've shown me is not something that can be explained by conventional science. This is something else entirely." Timothy's mind spun with confusion and relief. He had done it. He had proven that he wasn't imagining things, that something real was happening to him. But what did this mean? Why him? What was the stone, and why had it chosen him? Dr. Fairchild stood up and paced around the room, his hands clasped behind his back as he muttered to himself. Timothy could sense the doctor's fascination with his abilities, but also something else, a sense of fear, as if Dr. Fairchild was on the verge of uncovering something that even his scientific mind could not comprehend. "Tell me, Timothy," Drive Fairchild said, turning toward him, "have you noticed anything else unusual? Anything that might give us more insight into this phenomenon?" Timothy thought for a moment, then nodded. Sometimes I can hear voices. Not in the way you hear people talk, but more like a whisper in my head. And sometimes I see flashes of things. Like images of people I don't know, or places I've never been." Dr. Fairchild's brow furrowed. "Visions, or perhaps glimpses of the future?" Timothy couldn't answer. He wasn't sure what he was experiencing, but he knew it was far beyond anything science could explain. He was a boy, just a boy, and yet the world was shifting around him. Something was changing. Something vast and unknown, and Timothy had no idea where it would take him. The doctor's expression softened for the first time. "We will investigate this further, Timothy. You are not alone in this. There are others, people who study phenomena like yours. And we will get to the bottom of it." Timothy's heart beat faster, both in relief and fear. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain: his life was no longer the same. Whatever this power was, it was now a part of him. And the only question left was how far it would take him, and whether science could ever truly explain it. Timothy's heart raced as he sat in Dr. Elias Fairchild's office, the weight of his newly discovered abilities pressing down on him like a heavy stone. He had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. For all his previous curiosity about the world and its mysteries, nothing had prepared him for the strange and inexplicable power that now surged through him. The sensation was like a buzzing hum in the back of his mind, an electric pulse that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. It was as if something within him had been unlocked, something ancient and unknown, and it was now pushing against the boundaries of his understanding. Dr. Fairchild was no longer the calm, collected scientist he had once appeared to be. The stern and logical exterior had begun to crack, revealing a deep well of intrigue and uncertainty. Fairchild had always prided himself on his ability to explain the world with reason and science, but Timothy's case defied all conventional wisdom. It didn't just challenge the laws of physics, it seemed to mock them. The boy sitting across from him was not a mere child with an overactive imagination. Timothy's abilities were real, tangible, and terrifying in their scope. "Timothy, Drive Fairchild began, his voice soft but laced with a hint of urgency, "tell me everything. Everything that has happened since you first encountered the stone." Timothy's mind swirled with fragments of memories, glimpses of his visions, the feeling of the stone's energy coursing through him, the strange, fleeting thoughts that buzzed in his head like whispers in the dark. He had tried to make sense of it all, but the more he thought about it, the more fragmented it became. What he had once thought of as mere curiosity had grown into something far more complex and dangerous. And now, sitting across from the one man who might be able to help him understand it, Timothy was no longer sure he wanted to know the truth. I don't know where to start," Timothy said, his voice shaking slightly. "It all happened so fast. I went into the woods, like I always do. I was looking for firewood, and that's when I found it, the stone. It was glowing, like it was alive. And when I touched it, everything changed. Dr. Fairchild nodded, his eyes never leaving Timothy's face. Yes, the stone. What happened after that? Timothy swallowed hard, the memories flooding back in vivid flashes. He could still feel the warmth of the stone in his hand, the strange energy that seemed to hum beneath its surface. I touched it, and then, it was like a wave of electricity shot through my whole body. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Everything went black for a moment, and when I woke up, I felt different. Like something had changed inside me. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't normal. And then, I started to see things. To hear things. Can you elaborate on what you mean by hearing things? Dr. Fairchild asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Timothy shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He hadn't told anyone about the voices yet, not even his mother. How could he? He barely understood it himself. It's not like hearing a person speak. It's more like there's something inside my head. I can hear people's thoughts, sometimes. And sometimes, I see flashes of things that haven't happened yet. People I don't know, places I've never been. I don't know if I'm seeing the future or if it's just random. Dr. Fairchild leaned forward, his eyes widening slightly. You're experiencing visions, you say. Not dreams, visions. Timothy nodded, his throat tight. Yes, but they're so real. They don't feel like dreams. I see people, real people, not just faces, but I feel like I know them, even though I've never met them before. And sometimes, I hear their voices, but not out loud. It's like they're speaking to me from far away, and I can't tell if they're in my head or if I'm just hearing echoes from somewhere else. Dr. Fairchild's brow furrowed as he processed the boy's words. It was a lot to absorb, too much for one person to make sense of. Timothy's abilities were growing in ways that even the most advanced minds of the era would struggle to comprehend. The boy had tapped into something far beyond the realms of science. There was a power here that transcended anything Fairchild had studied in his career. And yet, he could not help but be drawn in by the possibilities. You've mentioned hearing these voices and seeing people from the future, Fairchild said slowly. Do you think there is a pattern to these visions? Are they tied to specific events or times? Timothy frowned, trying to sort through the haze of his fragmented memories. It's hard to say. Sometimes, I'll just be going about my day, and a vision will hit me out of nowhere. Other times, I'll think about a person, and then I'll hear their voice in my head. It's unpredictable. He paused, considering something. But I've noticed something. The more I try to control it, the more intense it gets. Like it's trying to take over. Dr. Fairchild's eyes gleamed with a mixture of fear and excitement. He had always believed that the human mind was capable of remarkable things that science had yet to explain. But Timothy was showing him something entirely new. This wasn't just a case of advanced intelligence or a rare gift. This was something different. Something that challenged everything he knew about reality itself. Timothy, Fairchild said, his voice low, I believe you are experiencing something extraordinary. These visions, these powers of yours, they aren't just figments of your imagination. They are a form of perception, perhaps an entirely new way of understanding the world around you. But we must be careful. The human mind wasn't meant to handle such power. Timothy's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? He asked, his voice trembling. Dr. Fairchild stood up, pacing back and forth across the room. He seemed lost in thought, as if trying to piece together the puzzle that had been presented to him. What you're describing, it could be a form of advanced mental ability. Perhaps a type of telepathy, or even precognition. But it's more than that. These abilities, they may be linked to something greater, something that we don't yet understand. And if your abilities continue to grow, there's a risk you may lose control. Timothy felt a chill run through him at the doctor's words. Lose control? What do you mean? Dr. Fairchild stopped pacing and turned to face Timothy, his expression serious. If your mind is constantly bombarded with these visions, if you cannot control the influx of information, it could drive you mad. The human brain is not equipped to process such power. And if you can move objects with your mind, if you can hear thoughts and see the future, then there is no telling what could happen if your powers become too strong. Timothy felt a wave of panic rise in his chest. He had never thought about the consequences of what was happening to him. He had been so caught up in the wonder of his abilities that he hadn't considered how dangerous they could be. What if he couldn't control them? What if they consumed him? I don't want to lose control, Timothy said, his voice small. I don't want to hurt anyone. Dr. Fairchild placed a hand on his shoulder, his tone softening. We'll work together, Timothy. I will help you understand what's happening, and I will help you learn to control it. But you must be patient. This is no small matter. What you are experiencing is a breakthrough, but it's also a burden. You must be careful how you use your abilities. Timothy nodded, his mind racing with uncertainty. For the first time since the strange encounter in the woods, he realized the full weight of the power that had been bestowed upon him. He had always longed to understand the mysteries of the world, but now he found himself tangled in a web of his own creation. What had started as a gift, a chance to see beyond the veil of reality, was now a terrifying responsibility. Dr. Fairchild sat back down across from Timothy, his hands clasped in front of him. There are others who have studied these kinds of phenomena, he said, his voice steady. People who have experienced similar things. We will find answers, Timothy. But for now, you must take control. Do not let these abilities consume you. Timothy's gaze fell to the floor, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. He was no longer just a boy who wandered the woods searching for answers. He had become something else, something that science couldn't explain, something that even drive Fairchild couldn't fully comprehend. The future, it seemed, was not something he could merely observe. It was something he had the power to shape. But as he sat in that small office, surrounded by books and papers filled with the knowledge of centuries, Timothy knew one thing for certain: the road ahead would not be easy. And the world as he knew it would never be the same again.